أعوذ بالله العلي العظيم من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. Let people in. Middle, 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 pull. All right, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people. Works for me. All right, everybody, welcome to session number 7, our second part of the reality of love. I hope you guys had a chance to look at some of that documentation I uploaded yesterday. I put together from my own notes this analysis, kind of a Jungian analysis I did of this treatise that we're finishing a couple of years ago. I had all these notes ready electronically and just basically assembled them all together into a little draft essay, and also Corbin's own translation from L'Archange Poupret, which is a great, I think personally, I like between Thaxton and Corbin, I like Corbin's treatment better. It has its idiosyncrasies. Corbin has this tendency to sometimes over Platonize things, even in Suhrawardi, but all in all, I think it's a fairly decent account of the Munas al-Oshaq, or the Vadekum of love, the Vadekum, the kind of Latin terminology from scholastic philosophy that Corbin was very well known in using in these sorts of for these sorts of titles. So here we are we're going to be reading now chapter 7 to 12 of this. And then, as usual, the floor is open for any questions and whatnot you have. But basically, in that Jungian kind of analysis that I gave of this, pretty much all of the elements that we need are in it, what we need to understand. So, and the thing is with Jung, even though he's coming from the language of psychology, Jung is such that you can then read back metaphysics back into the psychology itself. But all in all, this treatise is a treatise about suluk. And when we're talking about suluk, it's not just individuation in the Jungian sense. And I have been arguing with a lot of cognitive psychologists for years that individuation doesn't even make any sense without being on any kind of a spiritual path or doing wayfaring of some description, because the only way that, whether we're talking about a Gestalt experience or whether we're talking about some kind of a, aha moment, usually, even if you don't call it by that name of wayfaring, it is people who are in that sort of frame of mind that really get to realize the kind of contents of stuff that even Jung himself spoke of in terms of what individuation is or isn't. But that's another conversation. So let's just read this. Chapter 7. When Love finished his tale, Zuleika asked why he had come from his land. We were 3 brothers, he said. The eldest is called Beauty, and it was he who raised us. The youngest is called Sorrow, and he was mostly in my service. We were all 3 happy. Suddenly a voice cried out in our realm that in the world of earth one had been brought into existence, an amazing thing, both heavenly and earthly, both corporeal and spiritual. Not only had the other side been given it to him, but a portion of our own realm as well. Those who dwelt in our realm wanted to see him. They all came to me and took counsel with me. I explained the situation to Beauty, who was our reader. He said, "You must be patient until I go and have a look. If it pleases me, I shall send for you." We all said we would obey. Beauty reached the city of Adam in one stage. He found it a delightful place and camped there. We followed after him. As we approached, we were incapable of tolerating union with him. So we all lost our footing and each of us fell into a corner. And so we remained. Until now, when Joseph's turn has come and a sign of beauty was discovered in Joseph. I and my younger brother, who is called Sorrow, set out in that direction. When we arrived, beauty had become greater than what we had known him before. He would not allow us near, and the more we lamented, the more his resistance to us increased. Keep on, for cruelty becomes you. Keep killing, for error becomes you. You are much better than you are. Not seeing us agrees with you. Keep striving in tears and desperate sighs, for such water and air agrees with you. When we realized that he had no concern for us, each of us set out in a different direction. Sorrow went towards Canaan, and I took the road to Egypt. When Zuleika heard these words, she made a house for love and held them in greater esteem than her own life until such time as Joseph appeared in Egypt. The people of Egypt were put into consternation, and the news reached Zuleika. She told Love of this affair. He seized her by the collar, and off they went to see Joseph. When Zuleika beheld them, she wanted to go forward, but her heart's foot struck the stone of amazement, and she fell out of the circle of patience. She stretched out the hand of blame and ripped the veil of chastity from herself, and all at once turned melancholic. The people of Egypt fell upon her coat, and she beside herself recited these lines. That which afflicts one so that he divulges all is not like that under which I labor. It cannot be concealed. They claim that I love you, but my infatuation is more than what they claim. When Joseph became overlord in Egypt, the news reached Canaan. Jacob was stricken with yearning. This he told to Sorrow, who thought it best for Jacob to take his sons and to go to Egypt. Jacob deputized for Sorrow and set out for Egypt along with his sons. When he reached Egypt, he entered through the gate of the overlord's palace. Suddenly he saw Joseph seated with Zuleika on the throne of regality. He signaled to Sorrow. When Sorrow saw Love, he knelt in servitude to Beauty and placed his face on the ground. Jacob and his sons did as Sorrow had done, and all placed their faces to the ground. Joseph turned to Jacob and said, Father, this is the interpretation of my vision I related to you. I saw in my dream 11 stars and the sun and the moon. I saw them make obeisance to me. A Shiite interpretation mentioned the Shiite interpretations of this particular passage of the Surah of Joseph refer to the Ahl Bayt, the 12 Imams, or rather the 11 Imams, Muhammad and Fatima, alayhim salam, and the one visioning Joseph in these glosses is the Mahdi, is the 12th Imam. Chapter 9. Know that all of Beauty's names, one is Jamal and another Kamal. It is related in the reports of the prophets' locutions. God is beautiful and loves beauty. La Jamal wa yuhibbul Jamal. Yuhibbul Jamal. Everything that exists, spiritual and corporeal, seeks perfection. So you will never see anyone who has no inclination to beauty. So everyone is a seeker of beauty and strives to attain it. It is difficult, however, to reach beauty, who is everyone's object, because union with him is possible only through the intermediacy of love. Now, I should stop here, because in the French, Corban actually translate beauty with the feminine gender. It's a she in Corban's translation rather than a he. That Daxon has done it, and just as a reminder, Persian has no gendered pronouns. And this treatise is in Persian. And he does not allow everyone access to himself. He does not take refuge in every place and does not show his face to every eye. If perchance he finds someone who is worthy of that happiness, he sends Sorrow, the gatekeeper, to clean out the house, and he does not allow anyone into the house. On the advent of Solomon love, the cry goes up, O ants, enter ye into your habitations, lest Solomon and his army tread you underfoot and perceive it not. I.e., Let each of the ants of the external and internal senses take refuge in his own place and remain in safety from the harm of love's army. That no disorder find its way to the brain. Then love must circle around the house and inspect everything before settling in the chamber of the heart, some of which he destroys and some of which he causes to flourish by reestablishing the primal order. A few days are spent in this labor, then he heads for beauty's gateway. When it is learned that it is love who causes the seeker to reach the sought, one must strive to make oneself ready to know love, to recognize the stages and ranks of lovers, to submit oneself to love, and afterwards to see marvels. Expel the melancholy of emptiness from your head. Diminish your pride and increase in neediness. Your master is love. When you reach him, he himself will tell you how to act in the tongue of ecstasy. Chapter 10. When affection reaches its limit, it is called love. Love is excessive affection. So, hope and ishq are different concepts. In some of the Shia Hadith, although I question the authenticity of some of these recensions that occur in the Bihar, the Ahl Bayt are very emphatic that the attribute of ishq, which is eros, not be attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I question this. The narrations of these hadith are very weak in their asanid, in their chains of transmission. But one thing that we need to distinguish is that hub in Arabic is not so much eros, although sometimes it gets substituted for eros. Hub in Arabic is more something on the level of either agape or philia in the Greek. But ishq is very unequivocally eros. And there's a whole history of why this ends up in the mystical literature in the way it does. I actually agree with the glosses on this about why it does. We don't find the word ishq in the Quran, and very rarely do we find it in even the Sunni hadith. But for some reason, towards the time of Ibn Babawayh, etc., this concept seems to appear in certain Shiite corpuses of hadith, which raises questions about its authenticity, but that's another conversation. So he goes on. Love is also more particularized than affection because every love is affection, but not all affection is love. Affection is more particularized than cognitive knowledge because all affection is knowledge, but not all knowledge is affection. From knowledge, two opposites are born, affection and disaffection. Because affection is wanting to be with something suitable and agreeable, corporeal or spiritual, which is called pure good and absolute perfection. The human soul seeks and wants to reach and attain perfection. On the other hand, it wants not to be with something that is not agreeable or worthy, whether corporeal or spiritual, which is called pure evil and absolute deficiency. The human soul always flees from this, and thus arises a natural repulsion. Affection comes from first situation, and disaffection from the second. Therefore, first there is the rung of knowledge, second the rung of affection, third the rung of love. One cannot reach the world of love, which is above all else, without making a ladder of the rungs of knowledge and affection, which is the meaning of the words 2 steps and you are there. Likewise, the world of love is the end of the world of knowledge and affection. He reaches there who has attained the limit of the steadfast scholars and divine philosophers. Hence it is said, love exists for no creature. The state of being a lover exists for none but those who have arrived. Chapter 11. The word ishq, love or passionate love, is derived from ashika, a type of garden vine that grows at the base of trees. First of all, it secures its roots in the ground, then it rises up and clings to the tree. It keeps going until it has taken over the whole tree and chokes it until no moisture is left in the veins of the tree. All the nourishment that reaches the tree through the water and air, it plunders until the tree withers. That is such a spot on imagery the Suhrawardi is drawn here. Likewise, in the world of humanity, which is a microcosm of creation, there's a tree that stands erect and is connected to the seed of the heart, which grows in the ground of the celestial kingdom. Everything that is therein possesses soul. As is said, everything that is situated in that place stands on the rock and soil of the soul. The heart seed is a seed planted by the gardener of pre- and post-eternity from the storehouse of the souls arrayed in ranks, in the garden of the celestial kingdom of the Spirit at my Lord's command. He tends it himself. The hearts of men are between two of the merciful's fingers. He turns them however he wills. When the water of knowing that everything lives through water, along with the breeze of blast of God's breath in the days of your time, from the felicity of God's right hand, reaches this heart's seed, hundreds of thousands of spiritual branches spread from it. And that freshness and verdure is contained in the words, I perceive the breath of the merciful from the direction of Yemen. Talking about Uwais al-Qarani. Therefore, the heart seed, which is called the good word, is a reflection of this tree, the kalima tayyiba. Is a reflection of this tree in the world of generation and corruption, which is called shade and body and tree of erect stature. When this good tree begins to grow tall and reach perfection, love pops out from a corner and curls around it until it reaches the point that none of the moisture of humanity is left. The more love twines around this tree, the more the reflection, which is the tree of erect stature, grows weak and pale until all at once the connection is severed. Then the tree becomes absolute soul and is worthy to take its place in the divine garden. Enter among my servants and enter my paradise. Adkhul fil ibadi, adkhul fil jannati. Since the worthiness is to be had through love, love is a pious work in that it causes one to attain the rank where unto him ascendeth the good speech, and the righteous work will be exalted or exalt. Piety means receptivity to this age. When it is said that the so-and-so is pious, what is meant is that he is receptive. Now, this is a very interesting point because the word here is taqwa, and taqwa just doesn't mean simply piety in the conventional sense. It also has the denotation of God consciousness, right? But God consciousness in the way that Suhrawardi just glossed it here as a receptivity. So the closest word that we have, since we're going to be reading Ibn Arabi shortly, is that the word ma'aluh, something to be guarded, is a synonym for being a muttaqi, right? So this is what Suhrawardi is just basically put his finger on right here. Then, even though it takes the soul to the world of everlastingness, love brings the body back to the world of annihilation, because in the world of generation and corruption, there is nothing that can endure the burden of love. A great master has said in this regard, may the enemy whose desire has fallen in with union with you have access to joy for not one instant. No, I do not curse him after this. Even if the enemy is made of iron, love for you is sufficient to break him. Chapter 12. Love is a household slave raised in the city of eternity, and upon him the Sultan of pre-eternity and post-eternity has bestowed the office of prefect of the two worlds. This prefect patrols a different direction every moment and casts a glance at a different clime every instant. In his order of investiture, it is written that every city into which he goes must be informed of his arrival and a cow sacrificed for him. God commandeth you to sacrifice a cow. Unless the cow of the soul is killed, he will not set foot in the city. Soul here is nafs, and it's the nafs al-amara. Man's body is like a city. His limbs are its streets, and his veins are its aqueducts falling through the streets. His senses are its craftsmen, each of whom is occupied with a different task. The carnal soul is a cow that wreaks havoc in the city. It has two horns, one greed and the other desire. It has a pleasant color, bright yellow and fascinating. Whoever beholds it is gratified. She is a yellow cow, intensely yellow. Her color rejoices the beholders. Neither is it so old that in accordance with the saying, blessing is with your elders, it could be asked for a blessing, nor is it so young that in accordance with the maxim, youth is a branch of madness, the pen of responsibility could be removed from it. It neither comprehends what is legal nor understands what is rational. It does not long for paradise, and it does not fear hell. She is neither an old cow nor a young heifer, but of a middle age between both. Not knowing, not learning, not reality, not certainty. Like an infidel dervish, neither this world nor religion. It does not plow the earth of the body with the plowshares of ascetic discipline, so that it may be ready for the seed of works to be sown. And it does not draw with the bucket of contemplation from the well of deduction, the water of knowledge, so that it may attain the unknown through the known. It continually wanders in the fields of capriciousness with broken bridle. She is a cow not broken to plow the earth or water the field, a sound one, there's no blemish in her. Not every cow is worthy of this sacrifice. Not in every city is such a cow to be found. Not everyone has the courage to sacrifice the cow. Not at every time is this success given. Many years are necessary for one primal stone to be turned by the sun into the ruby in Badakhshan or a carnelian in the Yemen. And that was the end of the Munas al-Ushab, a treatise on the reality of love, which is a dense but extremely instructive allegorical treatise on the psychological or spiritual reality of what love is and isn't. My takeaway from this is, especially in that passage where he's talking about what ashika, associating ishq and ashika, the vine that strangulates the tree, that basically is a profound symbol that Suhrawardi throws there, because it means that the killing of, if not even the physical body, but the death or emasculation of the materiality of the human body is the victory of the soul. So the poison of love, which all the poets love talking about, especially in a situation of unrequited love, is actually this process. Is this very process? If people understood its reality properly, as Hafez loves putting in so many of his ghazals, the glance of the killing glance of the beloved, or if we look at Dante's trajectory before he wrote the Divine Comedy, is La Vita Nuova, where the character of Beatrice, this Florentine socialite upper class woman that he was in love with, that he never actually got to unite with, these images basically inform each other and tell us that love, true love, actually kills the ego. And so, in a sense, the consummation of love physically, in one sense, is actually a veil. This is what Suhrawardi is saying. This is what many of the Sufis are saying, because physical love is actually the metaphor for the real love. It is not the real thing. This is why in a lot of Sufi poetry, we have a reversal of, what is real and what is metaphorical or symbolic. So the material forms of love and infatuation and obsession and all the rest of it are actually the metaphors. The reality is beyond it. And so the floor is now open. That was my takeaway. You may have come away with something else, even better. But it's all open to you. Whoever wants to go first, jump in.
Yeah, Assalamu alaikum, Sheikh. How are you? Doing well, thank you. Yeah, so what was I gonna say? Yeah, I guess I don't really have a question, but I guess the idea that he's sort of throwing at us is this idea that love is almost very difficult. It's a very
Oh,
difficult thing, involves a lot of
first lines, the first very first lines of Hafiz's Divan starts with that very observation. لا يا أيها الساقي أدر كاسم ناولها كعشقها بل أصلا بل شروط مشكلات. Oh, Sagi, bring the cup of wine and pour it, for love was easy at first and then difficulty grew. Those are the first two lines of the Ghazals of Hafiz. Yes.
and it's funny because you can probably read that same sentiment in like R&B music that was like released in
Yes.
like the 90s or 2000s. It's almost like this eternal thing, and it's gonna exist. People are gonna be writing love songs for as long as humans actually, exist, right?
Yeah.
And one thing I was sort of interested in is he actually exalts love, calling it like the prefect of the two worlds. And I
Yeah.
found that very interesting because when Adam first comes out, when his existence first manifests in the other world, it's beauty that attaches to him. So I always had this idea that maybe beauty is a more fundamental thing, right? But
Beauty
then it
is
turns out
God.
that's actually
Beauty here is the standard, or, if we go literally by what he says at the beginning, it's the universal intellect. But the universal intellect here is also stand-in for God. So beauty and God are synonymous um, on one level. And then on the next level, we can then take love as being the intermediary between God and the world.
right. And it sort of strikes me that this intermediary is something that is sort of earned through the furnace of suffering. And there was a lot of writing about the wall of amazement that Zuleika stumbles upon and that love hits. And it seems to me that like the end result of love, through all of the sacrifices, all of the relinquishment, is like this sort of majesty or might that sort of arises, right? Yeah.
In a sense, yes, except it doesn't belong to you.
Right. Yes. And I think that was like the core like that was like the pivotal moment for love to realize
Yeah.
when they actually do make sajda, in the city of Egypt with everybody around, and yeah, yeah. Anyway, that was just something that was running through my head.
Yeah. Yeah, Vincent. Anyone else? Hassan, you were smiling, I see.
I would like to ask in the end because I have quite many questions, and I suppose maybe some of them would be asked by others.
Go ahead.
Okay, let's start then. Uh, the wordplay Ashika and Ishq, very good strike of Sheikh Suhrawardi. I think, is it possible also to have a play of words with the seed of the heart, حبة القلب,
Yes.
حبة, and which is love also محبة, حبة and
Yeah.
محبة.
That's done. All the earliest Sufis were already playing on that quite a fair bit. You see this in Sahle Tustari, in his Quran commentary, he plays on that in several different notable places. So yeah, that was already true. But what Suhrawardi does here is because Ishq becomes such becomes the central concept in Tasawwuf during his age, leading up from Tustari all the way to, or even before Tustari, all the way to Suhrawardi. We have this transition from hope to Ishq as being the centerpiece. So love is eroticized. Hope in the early period of Islam, and especially in the Arabic of the, or, kind of the, let's say, the Umayyad and early Abbasid periods, um, the connotation of the word hope has a more pietistic connotation. It is like agape in the Greek, right? Um, but as we move forward, and especially as the Sufi orders become more and more predominant in the Eastern Islamic lands, Um, even hope itself begins to change its, or rather augment its meaning from just the strict agapic kind of love to even an erotic kind of love. But ishq already, and also rakba already had that denotation of eros with them. And rakba also appears in the Quran in various roots, but not ishq. Yet ishq gains the notorious um, reputation and denotation and definition of that passionate, ecstatic, erotic, and even all-encompassing kind of love, such that from around, probably around slightly before the time of Hallaj, very short period of time, already this word ishq is functioning as a extremely important register of the kind of all-consuming kind of love that the Sufis were obsessed with. But
Also,
is has been, yeah, they have played on this. The Sufis have played on this a lot. Yeah.
uh, the other thing, the how to say it, the direction of Ishq is always up forward. Uh, where in Hayakul Nur, for example, the Shaykh says Allah Ta'ala is Ashik of himself and nothing else. Then the first intellect is Ashik of himself and Allah Ta'ala. And then the second of himself and on the of the first and of Allah Ta'ala. It is always goes in the direction of up, follows the beauty. And then what was troubling me? Okay, but this then would mean that Allah Ta'ala and the intellects doesn't care at all of what is below them. And the answer came that in a sense, even that they don't care, but when you have love or ishq, uh, let's say between man and woman, then the children are the product of love, the perfect product of love. The love is what is primary, the children are the secondary.
Mm.
That in a sense, even ishq goes forward, everything which is created of Allah Ta'ala and the intellects and so on, it is perfect and very beautiful because it is literally a product and a result of their love.
Yeah, that's all true. But in the context of wayfaring, in the context of suluk, um, it's not just vertical, it's not just going up, but the verticality itself is also occurring horizontally in this world. Right? And this is what Suhrawardi in this particular treatise is. He's not addressing, I mean, the end goal of this treatise is not, he's not addressing notions of conventional love. This is why I think Ibn Arabi is so great, is because what Ibn Arabi does is that he collapses all of these categories. He goes beyond Suhrawardi in this respect. But what Suhrawardi is addressing here primarily is the Salik, right? You know, if the Salik wants to understand what the Haqiqatul Ishq actually is, then this is what they need to understand about what love even is. Okay. So in one sense, Suhrawardi is coming at this discussion from a from his Zahidi kind of perspective, extremely psychologized. Okay. Whereas with Ibn Arabi, it may even to some degree begin with a Zahidi perspective, but very swiftly he casts the zuhd, you know, the asceticism completely by the wayside, such that then everything suddenly becomes the theophany of God. And you know, in his poem, the Tarjuman al-Ashwa, the interpreter of desires, he basically casts all of these kind of ascetic kind of barriers, completely throws them at the wayside. Because he was witnessing, he was having a mushahada of Allah's tajalli through this young Iranian girl at the Kaaba, right? So that entire treatise of poems and his commentary, the Dakhar al-Alaq, is all a commentary about his hall in actually perceiving, having shuhud of this, this situation. But with Suhrawardi, there is a more kind of a, shall we say, a Gnostic, capital G, kind of trajectory at work, where this whole stripping process, even if it's not happening in the body, but on the level of the mind, right? You need to understand what these are. So that's why I think with a treatise like this, Jung is probably a much more powerful contextual lens, because everything that Suhrawardi is saying here is about the process of the suluk itself with the aspirant on it. And when he ends in the treatise with the cow, which represents the body, the yellow cow, right? What is the recommendation at the conclusion? That this cow needs to be sacrificed, right? He's gone through telling us about the nature of what the reality of love is, likening the word ishq to its semantic, literal semantic meaning of ashaka, of the vine root that coils around the tree and saps this, the life out of the tree, right? And Suhrawardi finds this a very good process. So the more of a ascesis is occurring with the salik on their path towards ishq, right? The closer that they give to being annihilated. He doesn't use that word. The word that Suhrawardi uses, he doesn't use the word fana. He uses the word ta'amun, which is which I've been translating as contemplative annihilation, as sort of theoria, in the way that the Greeks have it. So this is where Suhrawardi is taking us. And so this Jungian approach that I took with this treatise, I think really fits here, because particularly when we have the imagery of the castle is the soul itself. And so all the levels of the castle, all the various facets of the soul that need to be understood in what their archetypes are.
He reading this treatise, it makes almost the Platonic ideas become live and
Yeah,
apparent before
yeah,
my
yeah.
eyes.
Yeah, he does. Yeah.
So vivid and
Completely animate,
so
yeah. Completely three-dimensional,
animated.
completely interactive. And this goes to what Suhrawardi, and this is intentional. He's doing this all very, very intentionally, because he's also communicating his metaphysics through this, where, each of these archetypes that he's presenting to us also represent on their own level symbols for the lords of the species that he's talking about. Because Suhrawardi turns the Platonic forms into an angelology, right? So as one is reading this, and this is why I think Corbin's French translator is a lot better than Thaxton's. Thaxton's translation is a little bit flat in its meaning. It doesn't convey a lot of the nuances that the original Persian does, but Corbin captures it in his own translation in French. So he begins in the chapter of Adam, he begins by talking about the realm of Malakut itself. So right there, he is signaling to us and telegraphing to us how we are supposed to even understand what these archetypes are, what they mean, how, and the way that he phrases it, this realm of Malakut in the appearance of Adam is in tumult. But what does this stand for when we go back to when we will enter the Hikmat al-Isra? That means that the realm of the Malakut is active, right? So these Platonic forms in the form of these angels are not static things. Because in Plato, if you take Plato as is, we have these idei, these ideal forms, and they're kind of subsisting out there, and they are always existing in the same state that they always are. These kind of miniature gods, as it were. Whereas with Suhrawardi's, these angels who are the lords of the species were the forms, the perfect archetypes and exemplars. They're very active. They're animate.
The next thing, the ladder of love.
Of essence.
Also, it maps it perfectly. So uh, the first ladder, the first level, he says معرفة, and then was محبة, and then عشق. So the first level, did I get it correctly? That to love something, the first thing, or at least let's say to like something, if we use a simpler word, you should be acquainted with him as much as possible. This is the seed. If you do not have this phase, it is impossible to get the next stage. And if I am to put a ladder which is even below it, you were putting the finger of it, that to be acquainted, to get the ma'rifah, we should have first the mushahada, the very careful observation by which we will get to ma'rifah. Could we put in such terms?
Yeah, we can put it in those terms. Sure. Yeah, we can put it in those terms.
And then the things just start to happen by their natural course, one after another.
Yes, but also remember that throughout the advice that is kind of the silhouette in this whole treatise is the striving. Not a passive process. It's a process of going through the levels of the castle or the 5 levels, etc. These are all, there's an assumption of active muraqabah. It's also something word that Suhrawardi actually uses in here that Corban correctly glosses, but which Thaxton seems to obscure in his English translation, doesn't footnote. So that muraqabah is basically the self-introspective or self-psychoanalysis that is going on, especially around the senses. And this is why he brings that verse from the Quran, which he then uses to liken the senses to ants.
Which leads us to the next question. When I was reading, I was so immersed in the text that I even was not careful to read the Suleiman love. I automatically read it Suleiman beauty. Thinking that this is the third manifestation of beauty, it was very natural for me that the majesty which is in Suleiman alayhi salam, it has its own beauty, and then the ants which are mentioned, oh ants, be careful that Solomon will not tread upon you, that these ants are all who claim to have love, but their love, it is not total love. It is not perfect. It is not complete. Okay, I love you, but you are do not. The love is not mutual. Then I don't care. Or I love you, but I love me more self than you. Such that if you are not ready to be totally annihilated, then you are like this ants.
Yes.
Better run somewhere that you will not be totally destroyed. And then the next thing which came to my mind, that here in my wrong reading, that the one who is not the ant but totally ready for this love, the Queen Belkis of
Whoop.
As it is given that Suleiman love, why Suhrawardi is attaching love to Suleiman alayhi salam?
Because Suleiman is also a beloved in the sense that he's a prophet. So he's a manifestation, he's the locus of the manifestation of beauty, which is a stand-in for God or the universal intellect, the Aql Kul, right? The Insan Kamil, by definition, even in Suhrawardi's cosmology, is the manifestation of that level that Ibn Arabi is talking about. The Nur Muhammadi, which is the intellect, the Aql Kul. So that would be the beauty. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Seely.
Sure. Jeff, you want to say something?
Well, speaking of those ants, I love that. Oh, ants, enter ye into your habitations, lest Solomon and his army tread you underfoot and perceive it not. I love that. And it reminds me of the saying, and I can't tell you how many times I've thought of this in the last couple of months for some reason. I don't know if it was Shakespeare who said it, but whoever said it, the famous saying, cast not your pearls before the swine.
That's in the Bible,
Yes.
in the New Testament.
Is it?
Yeah.
See, okay. I gotta read that thing one of these days. I
Jesus
did.
cast not pearls before swine, yet they trample them underfoot. That's straight from the New Testament.
Lest they be trampled underfoot, exactly. And I know you saw Led Zeppelin have been, Jimmy Page has been releasing all the songs from Physical Graffiti lately, and one of
Yeah.
them is Trampled Underfoot. And it's just such a great concept. And it's come to my mind so many times lately. Like, anyways, I just wanted to say that it was just a point of amusement. I did read, speaking of the Bible, what was it, Genesis 39, I think, that you talked about, and that was very, very interesting. But that leads me to a question. I have to refer to your notes here, for God's sake, your Jungian analysis or
Yeah.
your dialogue between Jung and Suhrawardi here.
Yep.
I wanted to ask you, what is the difference when you mentioned nostalgia and looking at Corbin's translation, which I only got down a few, like
See,
the first couple of.
this is the word anduh that Thaxton translates as sorrow and Corbin
Mhm,
translates in French as nostalgie, or
mhm,
nostalgia. Um, with Suhrawardi, it has to be taken in that sense of nostalgia. So Corbin is correct. And what Thaxton has done here is slightly obscure. By the way, if you read um, Landau, that review that Landau just rips Thaxton to pieces. But also there was a review of this, I think in England, back when it first came out around 1983. I don't have that, by Julian Baldick. And he also pointed this stuff out that Thaxton's choice of words that he was translating was extremely misleading on several of these visionary treatises. And when you say sorrow, it is true that anduh means sorrow. It's also true that in the context that Suhrawardi is talking, it also means sorrow. But it is misleading because sorrow doesn't tell you the why, whereas nostalgia tells you the why of sorrow. What is anduh sorrowful about? It is sorrowful about the fact that love is separated from beauty. So that nostalgia works as a lot better word in translation than sorrow on its own. Okay?
okay.
Because
All right.
nostalgia
And
in Suhrawardi also acts as the metaphysical steed of ascent. So it's not just, simple depression or sorrow, or any kind of melancholia for its own sake, right? It's all of these things for the sake of something lost to which it wishes to return. And this is a very key element to this story. So to leave it at sorrow in the way that Thaxton did is actually wrong. You should have, at the very minimum, you should have footnoted it, which he hasn't.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And what about the term, okay, shock or shock? I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but you've got shock slash and do. And so I wonder, is shock closer to nostalgia and do closer to sorrow,
No,
or is there any?
shahr means town or precinct. The shahr andu can be taken in, at least in the Suhrawardi instances, as the plain or the city of sorrows in the sense of nostalgia, or the city of nostalgia. Is one
Okay,
way to put it. Yeah.
okay. We should almost do another session on this one because
This is
you've made things even more interesting. I mean, it was enough if we were just going to read Thackson's translation, that would take up this session and the last one. But now that you've given us Corbin's translation and your essay, your Jungian analysis, that almost, I mean, I'm not asking to do it, but that opens up a whole new can of worms
oh,
almost. I mean, not really.
it
It's
is. I tell you, I mean, this treatise alone can function on its own as a very interesting cross cultural seminar about love in the mystical understanding of what that is. So I would use this as the kind of the template, and then I would bring all kinds of treatises or poetry from even medieval Europe, from the troubadours, from some of the mystics like Marguerite Poré, and the Ghibelline mystics. Then I would bring in other Sufis. I would bring in Rumi Hafez, and even stuff from India and China, etc. And then use this very treatise as the template to really explore this, and then obviously Jung would kind of function as the kind of the referee and mediator here. Um,
right.
yeah, I mean, this can very, very easily be turned into a seminar, a book. You
Oh, it's amazing. Yeah, you
yeah,
could write a huge book just on this treatise alone,
yeah, 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 yeah,
which, yeah, no, it's amazing.
yeah.
I'm not, excuse me. I'm glad that you mentioned that Suhrawardi has that he's got a particular thing in mind, whereas Ibn Arabi has a different thing in mind and maybe takes
Yeah.
it to another level or,
Maybe not different, not in terms of the end goal. It's not different. It's the how would I say it? It is the context or the facility by which they get to that end goal. For
Mhm.
Suhrawardi, there is almost an insistence on a sort of not just a philosophical ascesis, but also a physical one, that you need to mortify yourself, which is a very classic Sufi, classical Sufi approach to how you attain these higher states of consciousness. So where in the ascesis is involved. Now we know that Ibn Arabi engaged in exercises of self-mortification, and that's where he spent months on end sitting by himself in cemeteries and not eating anything. And apparently so did Suhrawardi. But with Suhrawardi, in my opinion, he is sort of stuck in that mode of ascesis as the modus operandi. Whereas, particularly when Ibn Arabi leaves the Maghreb and comes particularly to the first Hajj, that ascesis is no longer, he's at the other end of that entire process, particularly when he
Okay.
meets Nizam at the Kaaba. And he has that profound experience of divine feminine to this young Iranian girl, Nizam Ainul Shams.
Okay. All right, because I'm not really sure. I mean, perhaps it's because I've not, obviously I'm not Suhrawardi or Ibn Arabi. Obviously, I've got a long ways to go, but it's hard to imagine like killing the cow for one thing, once and for all. And because especially like according to your Jungian analysis, you mentioned the Ouroboros nature of the situation and it's like, is there ever any final, I mean, this is a novice question, obviously, but is it possible to kill the cow once and for all? Or is it just like a repeated, like taking the um
Well, if let's this is a very important question. Yes and no. Here's where you go from it. If you kill the cow completely in this life, that means you die. Okay.
Exactly.
Let's not beat around the bush. So how do we metaphorically kill the cow without having to literally kill the cow? And so these practices is what that does. It what it does, it basically tempers the cow that is out of control, right?
Mm,
Is
yeah,
tempered in that process through these exercises. But
right.
it's also so happens that you can push these exercises as many people did, as Suhrawardi is he claimed by some sources to have done, um, or others around him did, where you push these exercises to the point of death,
Yeah,
right? Because the view about death, physical death, is that this is the culmination. This is what Mullah Sadra was also talking about in another context in the last course that we did, that death is the perfection of everything, right?
right.
So if we take it from that perspective, then the death of the cow representing the death of the concupiscent, irascible ego, the nafs al amara, bil su.
Hmm.
If we take it from that perspective, then this is a salutary thing. But it so happens that sometimes allegory and metaphor basically collapse into the literal, and people end up dying, as many
Right.
Sufis did, sitting in a khalwa. They would mortify themselves, not eat, not to the point, and then suddenly, bang, they're dead. They have permanently killed the cow.
Right. Okay. Well, I'm not sure. That might be a good way to go. I don't know. But yeah, so this brings me to my final observation here is the cow having two horns,
Yeah,
one greed and the other desire.
yeah,
And for some reason that I'm still looking at that. Like, I mean, greed, I can understand, and untamed desire, I can understand. But I mean, desire just as a
yeah,
general
yeah. The
principle.
word is hasad, which means also covetousness, right?
Oh, yes.
So covetousness, these are the two things. All of the Sufis talk about the same thing at the very beginning of a path. That what you must temper permanently is bukh, acquisitiveness, and hasad. Okay, so because these things, and because the hasad wants to acquire constantly, it is never satisfied.
Hmm.
Whereas the bukh wants to keep what it has acquired and not share. One is
Oh,
miserly, mine, want, and then more, 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 more. These are two things that need to be tempered because they're, I mean, you could call them horns, but you could basically even call them the two mouths of the demon or two heads of the demon.
right,
One is a miser, and the other one is just a consumer that never is
right,
never satisfied.
right, right. Like, okay, yeah, like a monster, like a mindless,
Yeah,
out of control monster. Right, okay, because obviously both of those principles, as you said before, they're kind of necessary for the organism to continue
yeah.
and for the whole mechanism to go forward.
And
Interesting.
if you kill that, if you completely, literally kill that, that means that you die because you won't eat anymore, you won't consume anymore, so you force your mind not to acquire anymore. So that means that the
Right,
whole purpose of this biological carbon machine is just redundant.
right, right. But that was a good point, though. I mean, because we're looking as wayfarers, we're looking at the other side and you know, not getting stuck or fixated on this this world,
Mm.
um, which, you know, from an Islamic point of view is the dunya, right? So I mean, this isn't where it's at. So
Yeah.
naturally, so in that
So,
context, death is a good thing, you know? I mean,
well, yeah, but then by other token, then what is the difference between dunya and akhirah is only a basically one veil that separates dunya from akhirah. And this is not just a metaphor. That means that that world is in this world. The akhirah
Right.
is in the dunya, and the dunya is in the akhirah.
Right. Right. Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, you don't want to take the concept of death too literally either. So
Yeah.
there's obviously yeah, it's obviously a much more nuanced situation. Um, so that's why I say I don't know if that would be a great way to go. Those Sufis who actually literally died in their ascetic practice might be um,
Pushing things
they might have been, yeah, that they might have been on the a little bit on the excessive side of things. And there's another principle is like, excessiveness is also an error, right?
Yeah, of course it is.
So
Yeah, absolutely it is. But then by the same token, we believe that the destiny and providence, of all things is in the hand of the Almighty. So if someone has sat in a cave and
yeah,
mortified themselves to death, then that is the will of God.
right. Yeah,
It's a hell of a trip,
okay.
I have to say, either way.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure they were happy. So and I'm sure there's a probably the other side is they've got a reward on the other side anyway.
And sure, I mean, it's at least it's a permanent solution to the problems that they faced in Dunya. So,
Yeah. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
you're very welcome. Hussein, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here. I have to keep my camera off
No worries.
because of my internet. Yeah, I'll just share. This is a thought that I had from just lingering from last week. Sort of like a Jungian interpretation. It might overlap, or you might have addressed it already in your exegesis. But I was thinking about the difference between Adam and Joseph, and just those two episodes, and why things happen so differently. Because it seems like it starts off with Adam. The three siblings are all together. I mean, they're not completely conjoined, but they're like love has access, and they're not rejected by beauty. But then when it comes to Joseph, there's a kind of splintering. Like all three of these parts get beauty rejects love, and then love and sorrow go in different directions, and then eventually they come back. And so the way that I would look at this from from an Akbarian and also a Jungian standpoint is it's like the insan kamil as prototype and archetype. And I think this is language that Austin uses, if I remember correctly, that the insan kamil can be a kind of prototype, but then also an archetype. From a Jungian standpoint, it's sort of like an undifferentiated self-image and a differentiated one. So that process of individuation for Jung requires that there's a differentiation of all the different parts of the psyche first.
Yeah.
Like with the psychological functions, they all have to become differentiated, and so that implies a kind of separation. And you even see it in the story where that poem from today's reading, where let me see, keep on digging for cruelty becomes you, keep on killing for sin becomes you, you're much better than you were, not seeing us agrees with you, keep striving in tears and desperate sighs for such water and air agrees with you. It's like pointing to the fact that love is actually growing, and sorrow or nostalgia are actually growing by being separated from the object of desire. And that somehow there's something about this process that is necessary for differentiation and individuation, and then ultimately they all come back. It's like the insan kamil gets like reassembled or the different parts come
Well,
back together.
just before you go further on that point, what you put your finger on is very key here. What is nostalgia? What is grief? What is sorrow supposed to do? If we take this from an alchemical point of view, it's supposed to burn, dissolve. So it has the burning, that acidic quality to what? To dross. What's the dross here? It's all these various psychic residues and thoughts and etc. What the yogic or Indian texts call it the skamskaras, these psychic attachments, right? So that is the function of nostalgia, sorrow, on a path of wayfaring. It's supposed to burn you.
Mm-hmm. Interesting. I was also thinking of it as like if these are all parts of one being or like an image, like the insan kamil. Perhaps there's also a kind of we could also divide it up as a spirit, soul, body, and
Yep.
What indicates that to me is the very beginning, where if you match up this contemplation of the intellect with like the cosmogenesis that you find in Ibn Sina, that
Yes.
there is this kind of the intellect produces an intellect, a soul, and a sphere. And if we transpose it into the human being, then we have spirit, soul, body.
That's one way to look at it, which is very valid. Another way to look at it, you can use Jung again and use the symbol of the Ouroboros. If we take the beginning of the Risalat al-Ishq as the Ouroboros, right, then the entire treatise becomes how this Ouroboros starts to lose its unity and then comes back to its unity again. So in a sense, it is the classic alchemical process of solve et coagula. But, and this is the important thing, so if we get a state of undifferentiation, that Urubuk undifferentiation at the very beginning of the treatise, before even this intellect, this pearl is even produced by God, then when the protagonist towards the end of the story comes to the water of life, what that is supposed to denote is this is the point at which the prototype and the archetype collapse into each other, right? The water. So if you take the liquid, the watery symbolism of alchemy, these are the upper waters. The upper waters in alchemy, you have two levels of waters. You have the corrosive waters, which are at the bottom, which usually symbolize with the emotions and all the stuff that Suhrawardi just talked about, and then the upper waters, where the waters are still, and this is the water of the prima materia that is responsible for the generation of all things in its undifferentiated form. So at that level, once you get to the level of the water of life and you drink it or bathe in it, that is the point where that archetype and its prototype now collapse into the same. When you get the self with a capital S, the Atma, in the Hindu denotation.
Okay, great. I'll have to look at your analysis.
Sure.
Because that's this. It lends itself to a Jungian reading so easily.
Definitely. Very easily, yeah. It's just too easy, actually.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. Anybody want to say something more, Hassan?
Just let me to in the when he reached Egypt, he entered through the gate of the overlord's palace. It is on page 70, and it is how Sorrow and Jacob they enter to Joseph. It is the Quranic ayah which says, "O my sons, do not enter through the same gate.
Yeah.
Enter through different gates.
Yeah.
And here he points which exactly the gates of Overlord Palace. Can you elaborate more on it?
In what sense? What do you want me to? What? Whoop. Your voice is gone, Hassan.
What he means by the gate of Overlord's Palace?
The gates of the overlords. What are the overlords? Okay, the overlords can be taken in a couple of different senses. You can take it first of all as the planetary intelligences. That's one reading. Another is the senses, the primary senses. So rather than go enter Egypt through one sense, you enter them through multiple senses to get there. Because here, Egypt represents sort of an isthmus state. This is the Barzakh. So Egypt here in this treatise is a kind of a Barzakhi stage.
Okay. Or in some sense, we can say that his mushtarak, which combines all, but even it would be not very correct because it is only for the external senses.
Yes.
It should encompass even the internal one, the
Yes.
total.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. The next, you all already point to the symbolic of the 11 planets, the sun and the moon of Imam Mahdi alayhi salam, the 11 Imams, Muhammad and Fatima, salawatullahi alayhim. Here, in the context of the treatise, how can we decipher the symbolic of the ayah?
In what chapter of it? In that specific chapter where
It is the same, chapter 8. Chapter 8, which ends with this Quranic ayah. That, Father, this is the interpretation of my vision. I related to you. I saw in my dream 11 stars and the sun and the moon, which make sajda. I saw them make obeisance unto me.
Well, it's interesting because this is the point where Jacob and Zolecha are entering Egypt through different means, right? And who are they going to see? They're going to see Joseph, who represents what? Beauty, right? So as they have entered, then Suhrawardi throws in this very important verse, 12:4 of the Quran of Ahsan al-Qasas, the best of stories, such that this prostration that is happening from the sun and the moon. So who is the sun here? In here, now this is the debate. The question is, in this ayah, who is the moon and who is the sun? Is the moon Jacob or is the moon Zolecha, or is the sun Zolecha and Jacob the son? This is in this particular part when he throws that chapter. This is a good question because Zolecha is the exuberant figure here. Okay, the very exuberant, shiny. She's got no qualms in even destroying and eradicating her own reputation amongst her people because of her love for Joseph. So one can say that the sun is Zolecha here, and moon because of the kind of the sagely old white sage here stands for Jacob, so he is the moon. So it's already reversing this symbolism.
This is exactly which came to my
Yes.
mind.
Yes, this is what he's done. This is what he's done with this particular verse. And then the 11 stars here can be the Hissa Mushtarak. And there's a few other things that we can also take it as, it's not planets because there's 7 planets. but we can take it as the 7 planets and the 4 elements now. Also, the 11 stars, that's another way to interpret it. But here I would take the sun and the moon as Zulaikha and Jacob. And they are making obeisance to Joseph. Why? Because at the end of this chapter, they are specifically, Jacob and Zulaikha are specifically entering Egypt for the sake of Joseph. For the sake of
This
beauty.
time, when they are entering specifically for the Joseph,
Yeah.
which makes the restoration and
Yes.
the union
Yes.
possible.
Possible. Yes. Yeah.
Uh, on the same page, not so much as a question, but as a comment, that the last paragraph, everything that exists, spiritual and corporeal, seeks perfection. You will never see anyone who has no inclination to beauty. So everyone is a seeker of beauty and strives to attain it. I just would call this passage the Suhrawardian definition of Haraka Jawhariya.
100%. Yes, that's exactly what that is. Yeah. Very much so. Yep. 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 Yep.
Uh, I would also say, like Jeff, that this treatise, it is possible to make a whole course of
Yeah. I tell you, that's what I'm saying. I mean,
so dense.
we could have a 6-month seminar just on this treatise, picking apart and comparing every single one of its symbolisms, and just go on and on and on, and get as deep into it. Yeah, this is packed, very packed, and it touches on so many important facets of things that I think it deserves probably a super commentary of its own that would then compare and contrast everything that we have understood in world literature about this concept itself. So I agree. I agree very much.
Just as a final note, Saidi, this genre of visionary tales, which here Sheikh Suhrawardi is using and applying, beside the one of Ibn Sina, which we are going to read, do you know about other Islamic authors, philosophers, or Sufis who write exactly in the same style?
Not maybe in the same written style, but in poem, we have Nizami Ganjavi, who's earlier than Suhrawardi. And his trilogy, he has a trilogy of works, Haft Beikar, etc., Layli and Majnun. These are all trilogies that build on each other. There's 3 or 4 works, big poems too. He does that a lot. Habib and I used a lot of Nizami in our cards in the Nur Tarot. So, for example, the 16th card of the Nur Tarot is the Borj, the tower, right? So not only is there Suhrawardian symbolism, but primarily Habib took a lot of the color schemes out of the Haft Beikar, which is about 7 towers. He took that entire story and wove the color symbolism and the structural symbolism of Nizami into those cards. Right? So, yes, Nizami is one. In North Africa, you have Ibn Tufayl. We wrote a risala known as Hay ibn Yaqzan, kind of modeled somewhat like Avicenna's, except it's a little different in its thrust. But Ibn Tufayl was extremely influential even in the West, because his story then inspired it inspired the whole story of Robinson Crusoe, right? That whole Robinson Crusoe narrative comes from the Ibn Tufayl's version of the Hay ibn Yaqzan, someone who's found himself deserted on an island. We have there have been lots and lots and lots of these, but I mean, with Suhrawardi, because he crafts these visionary narratives with his specific Neoplatonic model in mind. For people like us, it is, kind of a wellspring that keeps giving, because the system behind it is we already understand. So these visionary narratives, what they do is basically then shed light on these various facets of this Neoplatonic metaphysics. So here in these visionary recitals, he's been showing us this model through the psychology. Whereas in the philosophy, he is showing us through the demonstration. Right? And once we get into the Hikmet al-Ishraq, there will be kind of a combination of different things, but it's mainly demonstration. But he also, throws symbols and whatnot into it as well.
And once more time, as you have said several times, we understand by reading through these treatises that they are completely inseparable from the philosophy part of Sheikh Suhrawardi. They're one whole. Final one.
That's what I've been saying this. Other people have been agreeing with me, but during pretty much the decade of the 90s and the zeros, when Hossein Ziai and John Walbridge were dominating the Suhrawardi studies scenes, they were just completely non-committal to this. But I've taken it even a step further, because I say that not only the visionary narratives, that you also have to take his prayers, that without his prayers, that we are kind of lost. So it is the Hikmet al-Ishraq, the visionary narratives, and the prayers that form an important kind of core with his other philosophical treatises like the Mashari al-Mutaharat and Kitab al-Talwihat, even the Alwah al-Imadiyah. These are kind of on a second route. I say that the real trilogy of Suhrawardi, the real Ishraqi trilogy, are all of the visionary treatises, the Hikmet al-Ishraq, and the prayers. That if we grasp these as the top trinity of the tree of Suhrawardi's thought, then this other stuff is kind of it's important. I mean, it sheds context to his work, but they're less important than these three.
And in the end, to repeat the words, I didn't know who the poet you say, but the same words for Suhrawardi. I don't know if he is Rasulullah, but definitely the treatises are
Well,
divine revelations.
I am going to talk about it. I'm going to highlight this in my translator's introduction. This is a feature of Suhrawardi's biography that was actually reported within 5 years after his death. In this book called, I think it's called Bustan al-Qulub or something else, where it is reported that Suhrawardi's disciples were calling him Rasulullah. Shahrazuri reports it again about 60, 70, 80 years later, and he's a bit, is trying to not to play too much and read too much into it. He says, and God knows the truth of the matter. But when you open the Hikmat al-Ishraq, when you read these visionary recitals, and when you look at the prayers, there is absolutely no question that what Suhrawardi is doing is not just a mere philosophical project or a mere, he is making a claim. You look at the very conclusion of the Hikmat al-Ishraq, the way that he talks about the Hikmat al-Ishraq is as if it is a piece of prophetic reception. These are not things that you can overlook. The Western Academy kind of mentions this, but they don't do much with it. The Hosa completely ignores it because it's too controversial and they don't want to lose Suhrawardi. But you are 100% on the money. I mean, Suhrawardi was making a prophetic claim. It was definitely, maybe not as a Nabi Tashri or within the context of a legislative prophet, but he was very much making a prophetic claim. No question. No question about it. And this, in my opinion, was a central element of what got these jurists in Aleppo so crazy at it. It was precisely that very thing. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to me, this is a good thing. This is not a bad thing. I mean, orthodoxy is a very,
I would add because I listened to the Telegram channel. You have some discussion about the topic, but you called him. If he would to live more time, he would create some kind of post-Islamic religion. But I would say that.
well, before you go,
What he is saying, what he is doing is not post-Islamic. He is exactly Islamic.
yes,
What I
yes,
do mean, because you have said that already in the Quran, the influence of Zoroastrianism is even bigger than the Judeo-Christian religion. The
yes,
Platonism is also sensible there. He
yes,
is just uh, reviving the project which
yes,
started by Rasulullah Muhammad
yes,
sallallahu alaihi
yes,
wasallam. That this is the real Islam which is
yes,
in Quran, which was abandoned
yes,
the centuries
I
before.
agree. I find, see, here's the thing. You put your finger on this. It's a very important thing. And I've had this discussion with even a lot of Muslims who don't seem to get their head around it. When we have certain figures in Islamic history who make these sorts of claims, the immediate assumption is that they're saying that the post-Islamic means a break with Islam. But yet we look at all of these various movements, whether we look at the Hurufis, the Babis, Suhrawardi, Noktawis, etc., almost everything that they do and say is occurring within a cultural landscape, and the language, they're responding to Islamic things. We can now take this and say that even Islam itself, based on its own claim, is claiming to be a continuity of what? Of the Abrahamic tradition, the Hanif, etc. So it itself is kind of making that claim to revival. So then what is the problem then when we have figures like Suhrawardi, Dabab, uh, you know, Fazlullah Astarobadi, and etc., and all these various figures that have come throughout Islamic history? Well, the problem is that, this it's sort of very narrow-minded interpretation of closure that then the jurists, the fuqaha, have guarded like hawks, cannot allow itself to be challenged in such a way. But that begs the question, and this is the question that Suhrawardi is asking everybody. Light has no closure. Light has no seal. Light cannot be sealed by anything. It doesn't have an end. Right? And Suhrawardi's entire metaphysics is a metaphysics of light. But to the world out there and to the authorities of Orthodox power, this is very dangerous stuff. That means essentially it makes their careers and their everything, their hand-me-downs, everything, makes it redundant.
And even Sheikh Muhyiddin, he challenges in a roundabout way even the end of Nubuwwat Sharia.
Yeah,
I forgot in which chapter, but when he is
the
speaking
Seth,
about
chapter of
ijtihad,
Seth, the second chapter of the Fusus.
that the process of ijtihad, it is uh, at least to some level legislation which is
Yeah,
exercised by the
yeah, which is a very Shiite thing to say on the one hand, but not a very Sunni thing to say. But Ibn Arabi said it, and he makes a very valid case for that. But by so doing, he's basically trying to imbue that function of ijtihad, of that independent jurisprudential reasoning, in the lap of the Sufis rather than the jurists, because the jurists, they claim to have closed the door on it. Yeah, so that is going on, and that is very, as a Sunni, there's one of two things going on. When someone makes that kind of an argument, either they are crypto Shia or they're making a prophetic claim. Because if you want to open wide the doors of ijtihad in a milieu that claims that its doors have been shut locked, then what is the only thing that can reopen it is a new revelation.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
This was a complete pleasure. This
Yeah,
session, all the sessions, I'm happy we're in this journey together.
yeah, this is good stuff. But these are important conversations I think that people need to have. Um, because in a sense, any genuine Gnostic comes to the point, and all of these guys did themselves, that the tradition in the way that it is understood and practiced by a society is a veil. God does not end anything. God is the infinite. The door is always open, right? So what is closing? What is creating all these doctrines and dogmas? And this is humanity, this is society. Even when it's hurting it. You know, they hold on to these ideas for dear life. They think it is their only way to salvation. I mean, come on. You know?
Just to interject on this, I find it kind of funny that people, like they always say, "Oh yeah, let's go back to the good old days, the good old days." But the Quran talks about how you can look at the ruins of the people
Yeah,
of the good old
yeah,
days. So, look
exactly.
at that.
Exactly. Look at those ruins. You know, how many civilizations were brought and then annihilated off the face of the earth? And besides, during those good old days, the people living in them were complaining about their time and looking back to another good old day from their time. So, I mean, this is like an infinite regress backward. Anyway, yeah, I really like this treatise of the Munas of the Shah, the reality of love. There is so much more we can say about this, and so much more that can be unpacked out of it. It is one of Suhrawardi's treatises that I keep going back to quite often. The next one we're going to read, The Language of the Ants, the Lughat Muran, is another one. It has some very dense symbolism, and this is all very animal symbolism this time. And this is a pretty good one. It's in itself also. So I'm going to also divide this treatise 7 into 2 sessions so we can really dive deep into its symbolism. And I will also try to translate Corban's. I have some of it already in translation. A lot of these I've kind of done over the years, and just I'm now going back to them and kind of putting them in their sort of semi-final drafts. So I will strive to get that to you as well. And then obviously tomorrow we're having the Ibn Arabi class, 2 of his chapters. So until then, everybody, I'll see you guys all tomorrow. Otherwise, if you're not coming tomorrow, then next week we'll get started in the language of the ants. So until tomorrow or next week, Yahak.